Okay, thanks, Hope. Give her another 30 seconds and then we'll start.
I think her internet often has trouble on these rainy, stormy nights. Rainy, cold.
Rainy, cold, stormy. Okay, we'll check in with her in a little while here. And so I'm just going to start this up. This is the revised agenda for the regular council meeting on Monday, January 10th, 2022. And we'd like to acknowledge with gratitude that we live and work in the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, whose people for millenniums have been stewards of the lands and waters surrounding Naklalaquam, Bowen Island. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have anything they would like to add or take out or not happy with? Looking for hands if I'm not seeing.
Just a few late items that were circulated earlier today.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just item 10.1, there was just a typo. It should be Councillor Hawking, or sorry, Councillor Hawking should be actually Councillor Kale. And then item 11.3, Trustee Kale has an item, the Southern Gulf Island Residents and Business Coalition newsletter, as well as item 5.1, there was additional correspondence from Tim Rhodes from the Health Center.
I see that. Terrific. Okay. Everybody good with that? If so, we will approve the agenda by consensus. Move on to public comments. Did anybody come up for public comment there, Hope?
No.
No. Okay.
We're good to move on.
Perfect. Move on to the consent agenda. Maureen, welcome. Good to see you.
Hi there.
Move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything in the consent agenda that they would like a little bit more clarification on? Or are we free to move through it? I'm not seeing any hands up there. And if not, the recommendation is that council approve the items as outlined in the January 10th, 2022 consent agenda, and we will move that by consensus. And move on to delegations. Wow, here we go. Oh, what have you got there?
We have Tim Rhodes from the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation joining us this evening. And take it away, Tim.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm Tim Rhodes, president of the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation. Many of the directors of the foundation are present either here on Zoom or via that other thing.
Okay. Yeah, that one.
Many of the directors of the foundation are present. I won't take time to introduce them. Their profiles are on our website. It's an impressive and hardworking group of volunteers. One of our directors is Greg Shepard, CEO of PharmaSave Western Canada, and he will be presenting to you this evening.
Awesome.
Greg?
Thanks, Tim. Go ahead, Greg.
All right, thanks, Tim. Everyone hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Great, thanks, and good evening, Mayor, and Council, and staff. I'm here tonight representing the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation and more than 500 island donors that as households easily swell this number to upwards of 1,200 people. I'm also representing the many more Bowen residents who support and anxiously await the opening of an on-island healthcare center. Islanders who have been reassured that the vision of a Bowen Island community health center could be a reality by the clear statements of support made by those on this council in the run-up to the last municipal election. And I sit here as part of a delegation that is frankly tired and confused. The foundation is a group of volunteers that has moved mountains over the past 7 years to get us to where we are today, the start of construction on the health center. We've worked as a well-intentioned partner with stakeholders, the municipality included, throughout this process on a project that responds to concerns and greatly benefits all Bowen residents. Through the immense generosity of the people of Bowen, we have raised just over $6 million in donations to make this happen. But because of COVID and so many delays, we now need to raise more, which will be no small task. So that's the tired part. The confused part is why, at this very late hour, at the very last minute, and days before the holidays, we've been asked by staff to review and sign a covenant in relation to waste treatment for the health center in order to receive an urgently needed building permit. We have no issue with covenanting that we will have an approved functioning wastewater treatment system before we apply for an occupancy permit. Given the trust we have built and the level of professionalism we have shown in all of our dealings, does anyone on council believe that we would advance this project to opening without proper waste treatment in place? Yet this is what the covenant purports to protect you from. The language of the covenant gives sole discretion to the municipality and includes commitments by the foundation to pay unspecified future costs, including, as we've just learned, $125,000 for fees and capital contributions to connect to the municipal sewer system, a cost that jumps to almost $250,000 when the cost to install and decommission a septic system is added. None of these costs were anticipated when we offered to purchase the land in 2019, nor would they be an issue now, but for the delays caused by council at the beginning of this term and the shocking news last year that the municipal sewer system would not have capacity for the health center. It is a direct result of these delays that our project is now faced with raising a substantial amount of additional donor dollars. The proposed covenant also includes a full release solely in favor of the municipality and forces the foundation to accept all risks and costs, removing any ability to reasonably negotiate in the future on behalf of the Bowen community and the health center. So while we certainly can't afford to delay the project by not getting a building permit, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our community and cannot take on unnecessary exposure to long-term financial risk that is proposed in this covenant. We are at a tipping point and need councillors to demonstrate their support for the health center shown during the last election, and to do nothing that undermines the foundation's capacity to exercise good governance of the significant funds donated by our community, or our capacity to raise additional funds in the future. Remember what the health center is to the Bowen community. The foundation isn't a for-profit enterprise that can simply raise prices or fees to meet our construction costs or operational expenses. The center is not a commercial venture or a private interest like a residential home. It is a vital community asset, and there is nothing more certain today than the fact that our community needs and deserves this health center. We have attempted to work constructively and in good faith with the municipal staff to find a reasonable way of moving forward to address our concerns with the proposed covenant. In our submission to Mayor and Council, we provided additional details and context as to why our delegation is before you today. Our ask of this council is that you continue your support for building a health center for the benefit of all Bowen Islanders, help reduce the administrative hurdles and financial risks once again before us, recognize that there is no risk to the municipality, and direct staff to waive the need for this unnecessary covenant as a requirement of obtaining a building permit, and allow staff to issue the building permit while the septic easement and related agreements are being finalized. On behalf of the foundation, our community of 500 plus donors who have provided more than $6 million in funding, and the entire Bowen Island community, thank you for your understanding and support this evening.
All right. Thanks very much, Greg. Anybody have any comments on this? Going forward, Maureen? See your hand up?
Just that there are a number of related items on the council agenda that I would like to hear from staff on before commenting further.
Okay, thank you. David?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Gary. Just to be clear, I mean, I appreciate everything that you said, Tim and Greg, and obviously you're in a difficult situation with costs going up. Can you be more specific? So you're just simply the covenant as it stands. Are there specific items in that covenant you could just feel are the ones that you're objecting to? I mean, I read it through and it seems that there's enough room in there for flexibility, but perhaps you could be more specific about what specific parts of this covenant cause your difficulty.
Well, if I can answer that, in at section 5, at the end, it says including payment of any fees or capital contributions that may become due or owing at that time. And that, to us, is a fairly open-ended statement of what those fees might be. As you know, we're taking on the extra expense of a septic field because the sewer capacity isn't there for us. The other issue is really the release and indemnity that really takes away any recourse we might have to try and negotiate those fees somewhat, given the situation we're in.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Tim. No, that's okay. I mean, I guess I read number 5 and it said on Bowen's request, make commercially reasonable efforts to connect, et cetera, but it's okay. All right, thank you very much, Tim.
Allison?
Muted. Is the money the province is contributing included in that 6 million?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And there's no timeline on that? It's good? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Michael?
Yes, Tim and Greg, listen, thank you for your presentation. And I must say, I've read the documentation too, and I'm just holding back. I think you've answered the question, Tim, that I wanted to hear about some of your concerns. I hope you'll just bear with us for a short period of time while we hear from our planners. I have to say, as someone who's an intense believer in your project, perhaps we can pick this up during the body of this meeting, and I think we must if you'll just bear with us for a short period of time while we listen to the other submissions that we're going to get from our own municipal staff. So please don't take that as a sign of lack of compassion, disinterest, or non-belief in your project. We just this is not a situation that I wanted to find myself in as a councillor, I can assure you. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I would just add that, and we're going to discuss this a little bit later, but there was absolutely no question going into this that, well, for a while anyway, that you were going to have the septic field option, because we're not going to be ready to put it on the Kobe sewer. That's been alive for a while. The other thing is that if the covenant, maybe it's the body of the covenant, I think it's pretty nebulous, and we could have signed it off 3 weeks ago, and you'd probably have a building permit at this time. So that's unfortunate that we lost that time in there, but we'll work on it in the space of the body of the council meeting here, and hopefully we can come up with something reasonable for you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And we will move on to the business arising from the minutes. 6.1 is a rezoning application, RZ03-2020, Area 1 of CD 18. That's Ian Stewart and Allard O'Coughlin. I never get that name right. Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I'll just start my presentation here to share my screen. Okay, do you see that okay?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. So as the mayor said, we're here talking about a rezoning application for Area 1 of CD 18, which is the Arbutus Ridge Comprehensive Development Zone, located on the west side of Bowen Island, up Joan Audrey Lane, off of Windjammer. There's the ortho photo showing development. So the application received is to permit a use called accessory residential use throughout Area 1. So that is how we define a secondary suite permission, either attached or detached. So the CD18 zone currently does not permit that accessory residential use. So the CD18 or Area 1 of the CD18 zone permits detached dwellings, open space, and public trails, and it allows uses accessory to principal uses in domestic agriculture. And the Area 1 permits up to 38 dwellings. There's a number of regulations in the CD18 zone about density. So it has a maximum lot coverage of 25%. It has a maximum floor area of all buildings, excluding garages and accessory buildings, of 260 square meters per lot. So that's about just shy of 3,000 square feet. And it has a maximum number of accessory buildings on any lot of 2 permitted. So staff presented this application to council at the October 12th, 2021 council meeting, at which point council referred the application to the Advisory Planning Commission, the Environmental and Climate Action Advisory Committee, the King Edward Bay Water System LAC, the Parks, Trails, Greenways Advisory Committee, and the Housing Advisory Committee. So I'll go through just the referrals and what we heard through that process. So the APC discussed it and they supported the rezoning application. The Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee also supported the rezoning application with a number of comments about permeability, availability of water, stormwater management, pedestrian safety, public transportation, no increase of lot coverage, not allowing secondary suites to be available for short-term rental. The King Edward Bay met and discussed this November 17th, and the King Edward Bay Water System Local Advisory Committee did not support the rezoning application. And their rationale is laid out in their recommendation, but in essence, because of the lack of progress on a MOU for the West Side Water Systems, they are reluctant to support the adding of additional users to the system until there's further progress on the West Side Water System. And the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee discussed the application and adopted a motion providing comments, stating concern for increased density on local trails and beaches, increased foot traffic, beach visitation, concern about the potential increase in impervious surfaces, and concern that the increase of allowing the secondary suites or detached secondary suites may lead to future applications for variances to increase the lot coverage. And the Housing Advisory Committee met and discussed the motion, and they supported the rezoning application, stating they support the creation of more diverse housing options on Bowen Island. And they recommended to council to consider the potential for density bonusing to allow increased floor area for the creation of secondary suites, seeing that the creation of additional rental housing in the zone would be a benefit for the municipality as a whole. And they are so moved that council should consider whether it should capture the potential lift in value of the affected properties, but noting that the current covenants include a contribution to the community center as part of a previous rezoning. So taking all of that, I brought just a few items for council's discussion before a recommendation for council to direct staff to prepare a bylaw to receive first reading to bring about these amendments. So the first one is the discussion of floor area. So the current zone has a regulation that gives a maximum floor area of all buildings, excluding garages and accessory buildings, to a maximum of 260 square meters. And so I know any future amendment bylaw would want to address this total, or address clearly if this total includes a detached secondary suite. Is that an accessory building, so excluded from the floor area, or is it included? And I think absent any direction from council, I would write an amendment bylaw such that any accessory residential use would be included in that 260 square meters. So, you know, it may technically be an accessory building, but it's meant to be part of the livable floor area in the zone. And then I just sort of note that the Housing Advisory Committee was recommending increasing the number to accommodate secondary suites, while Parks and Trails and the Environmental Climate Action Committee both were concerned with increase in buildable area in the zone. So we kind of had a split recommendations from the committees. The report goes into more detailed looking about water and the concerns on the west side about availability of water and what impact this would have on it. So the report links to a report done by Urban Systems on the West Side Water System. And the report found sufficiency in the King Edward Bay Water System to accommodate the proposed rezoning. And the report assumed, crucially, it assumed that additional units coming on board or additional lots would have secondary suites contained within them, and the population assumptions in the report assumed that lots would have secondary suites. So the report notes, and I think staff are aware of, and had council direction that there needs to continue to be progress on developing an MOU, and increase sort of cooperation between the West Side systems to address some of the water challenges. But staff recommend that council proceed with the rezoning application on the understanding that a West Side MOU will continue to be developed through 2022. And so not to place the rezoning application on hold until such time as that is further addressed. And then the staff mentions a few other considerations that I won't go into great detail here, but some of the committees had discussions about amenity contributions or beach impact, residential guest accommodations of short-term rentals. And I'll just note that that's not a permitted use in the zone. So committee's concerns that any secondary suites would be used for short-term rentals, this zone does not permit that use. So it wouldn't be a consideration. And then the report finally has an update from the applicant on the status of the cottage residential development in area 2 of the CD zone. So the recommendation from staff is that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to allow for the rezoning application as outlined in this report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Daniel, and thank you for this report. It's very inclusive. I think the report back from the different committees has been excellent. I think most of it is covered. I agree in principle that we shouldn't be increasing the lot coverage, and I also think that 20 the lot, or not the lot coverage, but the square footage should say where it is. How many units now? You've got 15 units here. I didn't think it was that high that could actually fit on these lots as detached. How many units on this 38 lots?
Yes, I mean, that was our estimate based on lots that were created and then lots that are in proposed subdivisions. Now, I know it's sort of a hard number to pin down because some of the lots are created, some are not created. So it's like, well, the subdivision could change, lot sizes could change even based on, rezoning went forward and they said, well, let's actually try to increase the number that could have detached secondary suites. Like it could change because the lots aren't physically there at the moment. So, I mean, a safer way of looking at it is it would permit, up to 38 additional accessory residential uses, secondary suites of some form, either within the building or separate. I know at one point planning staff did a look at sort of what number of building permits contain secondary suites in zones where it's allowed, and it's about a quarter.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure how much that would change. If this was a new development now went in, would it be more than that or not? I'm not sure, but so one way to look at it is just to assume, there's 38, like in terms of water usage or whatever else, an assumption be you'd want to assume that all 38 build out, so you're not into trouble later.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe. We certainly need the housing anyway. Okay, David, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And Daniel, thank you for this report. I think you covered all, there were a lot of issues that were raised by the committees, and I think you covered them all well. And so I'm in support. The only one that I'm nervous about is the water one, and the fact that there is no MOU. But I'm asking for some clarification here. I mean, I'm not a member of that water board, but that's where my water comes from. Does that put me in any position of conflict, or should I be recusing myself here?
I wouldn't. You get your water from King Edward Bay.
Yes,
don't you, David?
Yes.
Yeah. No. Well, I don't know, Liam. What's your call on that? I
think that it could be considered a conflict. So it might be best to recuse yourself there, Councillor Hawking.
Sure.
I'm happy to answer questions from staff perspective about the status of the MOU or impacts that it may or may not have on this.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Liam. I mean, I support all the other stuff, but I'm pulling out in terms of the water. So I'll take my hand.
Yeah, I don't know if it's financial, but it certainly is water.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, David. Sue Ellen.
I think Rob was first there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, got mixed up. Rob, go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, Daniel, just a comment. It's a bit more of a generalized comment because we're trying to also prevent sprawl away from the cove. We want to make sure that, housing development is in easily serviceable areas, so not on the other end of the island. How does this fit into that plan of not wanting to see sprawl moving out into the forest across the entire island instead of trying to strategically create more growth in the cove and not having it spread out? How does that work within the plans that you guys are looking at in the planning department to make sure that we meet those objectives?
I think the ECAC committee actually had a really good discussion on that same topic and that same consideration about, it sort of, does this meet the targets we'd want to see in terms of concentrating growth? Where they sort of ultimately landed and why you see the motion to support is that, to some sense, like this rezoning that occurred that permitted 38 lots is in place. The lots, are currently being created. So whether or not they're created with secondary suites, they're likely to be developed in short order and developed. And so then it becomes a question of like, well, would you rather see them developed as single family homes or single family homes with the potential for rental accommodation as part of those units? Yeah, so I guess that it's not necessarily a question of like, would you want to see development here at all, but it's sort of, should the development have the potential for secondary suites within it or not?
Just a quick follow-up, Daniel. When you did that report, it was about, it's coming on half a year now ago, or maybe a bit less, on just looking at potential future development of lots, and you came up with some numbers. Was that taken into consideration? Were these lots taken into consideration for having two units on them?
The report considered just number of units, but it would have considered like sort of primary dwellings on each lot. So it would have looked at number of lots and wouldn't have considered if they had secondary suite potential or not.
Okay, so this would be extra on top of that, basically, if they get developed.
Yes, I think, but to the extent that, the other numbers for the CD zones, they would permit a number of units with, the potential for attached or detached secondary suites as part of them. And this CD zone would have had a number that, at the time of the report would not have permitted secondary suites or detached secondary suites.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Just for clarification, though, there aren't too many other developed areas that don't allow, is there?
No, when I brought my staff report in October, I looked at, where it doesn't allow it. And primarily it's in the Cove. There are some zones where they're allowed on a limited number. So I know like the neighboring Evergreen development allows the accessory residential use, but it's limited. So not every lot can have one.
Okay.
But primarily places we allow single family homes, they're allowed accessory residential use as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, over to Sue Ellen.
I think Maureen's hand was up first, but
just carry on. We'll get her done.
Go ahead, Sue.
Okay, all right. Since my name has come up, I will just say I agree with Rob. I'm concerned about adding rental houses at the far end away from the Cove. I think rental should be concentrated in Snug Cove, as our OCP suggests, our official community plan. And I wish I was seeing more reference to the official community plan in these reports. Perhaps, Daniel, you could speak to, well, anyway, I just wish it was commented on a bit more. I know it's the foundation that's behind the land use bylaw and previous decisions of council, but there are some big concepts in there, like concentrating housing and development, including rental near the Cove, and that I'm uncomfortable with here. I am comfortable with the idea of leaving maximum floor area unchanged if we were to move this forward. And one of my questions, I'm concerned about the water as well. So one of my questions is the unbuilt area, the cottage residential development that's planned to start in June, if I read the report correctly, or this upcoming year, where will its water come from? If you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think my assumption is that they're on the King Edward Bay system as well, but they're definitely within the boundaries that we have mapped.
Okay. So that will all be coming out of that's another additional draw on the King Edward Bay water system. And I'm concerned with the comments from the local advisory committee and with the whole situation of fresh water as we head into climate impacts, as well as increasing use, right? I'm concerned that the local advisory committee couldn't find it support for it. So I would like to suggest that we make the recommendation that staff suggest if we're uncomfortable with that, and that's on page 5 of 7, just above the number 3. And I'll be prepared to move that council direct staff. Can I move this now?
No, let's finish the conversation.
Okay, all right, I'll hold off on that. And I just, I want to say also that I think especially going into, we're seeing all these climate impacts this year, especially in terms of weather and in the summer in terms of the heat dome and water shortages. Even back in 2015 was a really bad year for some places, including Metro Vancouver. And so I just think we need to have a healthy ecosystem in the neighborhood as well, as would have been considered back when the original rezoning was done, so that rainwater is slowed down and has an opportunity to filter into the ground or into the creeks and into the vegetation, keep everything moist. So to keep the fire danger down, all those kinds of things were considered. And I want to also just say I support the recommendations of the Parks, Trails and Greenways. Those beaches down there are tiny, and they get more and more use as including people from the city, and they're that's partly how the zoning came to be as well, was trying through the official community plan to balance all the different needs and the limited resources. So in general, I'm not in favor of having 2 houses on every lot or these lots either. And I'll be prepared to make that motion about severing the water use portions, as I mentioned earlier, for the water supply. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue Ellen. Okay, Maureen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm prepared to support the recommendation as written. I found that the explanations that the planner, Daniel, provided in his report were convincing and comprehensive. The 260 meter restriction, I think that we should stay with that. The recommendation that was coming from the Housing Advisory Committee had to do with incentivizing the creation of secondary suites. If we can have the secondary suites without resorting to incentivizing, all to the good. As far as the water is concerned, the narrative in the planner's report regarding the urban systems assessment of the water capacity, in which urban systems made the assumption that there would be secondary suites throughout the system. It gave me some comfort. And in reading over the concerns from the King Edward Bay LAC, I can understand that they are eager to conclude an MOU, but those things sometimes take time. And I'm pretty confident that municipal staff will work that through to a satisfactory conclusion on both sides. The clarification around the residential guest accommodation not being permitted as a home occupation in this use was helpful. And I think I missed something in the conversation with the mayor about the other areas where there were similar restrictions. So Daniel, could you recap that for me? Which other areas other than Artisan Square and in the Cove, which CD areas don't permit?
It was in the report somewhere.
It was in my previous report, but what my previous report didn't note is I believe that the evergreen CD zones permit it on a limited number of lots. So, you know, when I brought the previous report, I looked, okay, where it does not permit it at all, and it's in the Cove. It's for attached housing. We don't permit accessory residential use. So basically everywhere else that allows single family homes permits the accessory residential use,
Right.
with the exception of around the golf course. And then, as I said, some of the CD zones permit it only on a, you know, like a selection of the lots. So like Evergreen will allow a certain number of lots, and they have a smaller number of accessory residential units that are permitted.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the rezoning on this, on Arbutus Ridge was done prior to permission for detached secondary suites. I recall that.
Yeah.
One question regarding the permission for 2 accessory buildings. Does the 2 accessory buildings include a potential detached secondary suite, or is it in addition to 2 accessory buildings?
So if permitted, the accessory residential use, and then if they built it as a separate building, then that would be one of the 2. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That wasn't clear to me in any of the material that that's what it would be. So just to keep in mind when you're drafting the bylaw. And then just finally, a reminder to council, when we had our committee of the whole, and we're looking at housing issues on the island, the question of density was part of that discussion. And there was a sense that in some areas, it probably did make sense to have increased neighborhood density. So on that basis, I am not going to have a sort of pro forma response of density increases only in the Cove, because I don't think that that's a particularly practical approach. I think it's rigid. And if we have the potential to have, you know, a fairly significant number of rental homes in a decent area that has good roads and is going to have, you know, the utilities in place, then I'm all for that. So that translates into supporting the original recommendation that's in council and sticking to that 260 square meter cap. That's all.
Thank you, Maureen. Allison.
Okay, so there's 14 lots that could have supported detached secondary suite. I'm not overall the idea of having detached secondary suites or attached secondary suites out in King Edward Bay, given that that's the only way people can, you know, create housing for either their families, like their children who have families, or an adult that needs to be near to the sandwich generation to look after, you know, to be there close to them. So enabling that kind of thing and not forcing all those people to be in the Cove. I'm quite happy with having another development allowing detached and attached secondary suites out in King Edward Bay. The issue, I think, is I've got a question on the lot size though, and I was around when we did the 25%. How, on the basis of the existing like SR2, which is the King Edward Bay, it's 100 square meters plus 10% of the lot area. So those lots that could support a detached secondary suite, what is the lot coverage under that other formula compared to 25%?
I would have to calculate it because it would depend on, you know, like the SR2 zone depends on the lot size, right? Because
yeah, so a one acre lot is how many square meters?
A 1 acre lot, does a 1 acre lot hit the maximum of 500 square meters? Or is it a 2 acre lot? I don't know off the top of my head, Allison.
Yeah, 1 acre lot, I think.
Yeah, it just seems that they've ended up with a bigger lot coverage than the King Edward Bay SR2 lots, but I'm not sure. Anyhow, that's something that I'm still trying to get my head around. And I certainly agree with keeping, you know, if there's a detached suite, it has to be one of the two accessory buildings. And then the garage, I guess, could be huge depending on the calculations. So the other issue, I guess, and the really sort of sticky one is the water. You know, the LAC had a lot of discussion about this, and for the long term, they're not unhappy that they're, you know, in the long term, there will be enough water, but in the short term, as we know, from water having to be supplied over the summer, there is issues with, you know, with blue water. And at this point, I totally agree with them. I think they're reluctant to say go ahead until there's some activity happening on getting ahead of and addressing the issues that need to be addressed to get the blue water supply line sorted out and that kind of thing. So I'm at this point tending more towards the alternative resolution. And they're going to have to provide another well, correct? Or is it not?
Sorry,
Just doing the Ian Stewart part of the rezoning.
That's well, I think.
They're not hooking into the King Edward Bay water system.
no, correct. They're on private water.
Yeah, so that won't, yeah, because I just, yeah, so, you know, from the LAC's perspective, and I am, you know, agreeing with them, that there needs to be some activity moving forward on getting the blue water issues solved before you start potentially exacerbating the problem by adding more dwellings. And that's, you know, it's just because somebody that might be in the dwelling might be living in the primary house, and now we're going to build a suite for them. So you're really not adding water usage. I'm not sure that that's really a correct sort of assumption, which was in the report. So that's sort of where I'm at.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Liam, do you want to just talk about that, the MOU and where it's at, and
Yeah,
could you add anything there?
yeah, sure thing, Mayor. The MOU really came to a bit of a stall in the fall, and when some of the Blue Water committee members felt that the way that the MOU was crafted, you know, the language in the MOU wasn't very inclusive, or maybe limiting. And so we're working to try to get a better sense on what needs to be amended in the language to make it amenable to everyone to sign on. The chairs worked diligently together for quite a bit of time to get to the place where the chairs all agreed, but not all the members of Blue Water Committee agreed with the MOU itself. But the content, the substance of it, really, I think is fairly agreeable. And so it's more some of the surrounding language. And really, it comes down to the basic concept that we would apply to any service, whether it's a water service or any other service. And that's the benefiting users of any infrastructure pay for that infrastructure. And so, you know, whether all the systems are connected and jointly sharing water across systems, it wouldn't matter. There's still a possibility to isolate costs to whichever system or neighborhood to incur those costs. Any municipality employs that same type of tool. So you may have one water system, but ultimately you can still have a local area service for the purpose of repaying capital charges that are limited to that local area. And so that's really what we're trying to get to agreement at, is that no matter what the case going forward, the systems really will benefit from sharing water across the system boundaries and optimizing those water systems. But we really do want to make sure that the benefiting users still pay for the system, for the benefits that they enjoy. And all the chairs effectively agree with that. It makes a whole lot of sense. It's pretty common practice. And so we just need to regroup and try to make sure we can get the language right so that everybody can move forward in that vein.
Okay, thank you, Liam. Michael.
Yes, Daniel, so by the way, thank you for your report. When I read your report, and bearing in mind the previous conversations we've had in this particular area, I thought to myself, well, good, we're moving ahead because a couple of things. One, because of the accommodation so desperate, the housing accommodation so desperately needed. And we don't have an absolute mantra. While we all understand our desire to increase density around the cove, I don't think anyone needs a lecture on that. This is not a totally held and fast, will not bend, utterly rigid concept. So based upon what I've read, based upon my recollections of the prior conversations, based upon what our CAO has just told us, I'm certainly prepared to support the recommendation and move on so we can get this much needed accommodation built on Bowen and get this project underway. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Alison, your hand is up from the last time, or have you got something else?
I didn't put it down, but I would have put it back up again. Michael's comments sparked another question in my mind. Liam, when's the next meeting planned for the committees to get the MOU back on track?
Between the chairs, we don't have one scheduled.
And the last one was when?
In the fall.
Thank you.
So in reference to the water thing by the urban systems, they make it quite clear that crucially, the report assumed that every property had the potential for a secondary suite, and it won't be every property that takes that water for sure. And I understand how there is three different water systems down there and how they're all going to have to share for a while, which the MOU would obviously fulfill. I just don't see that it's going to be a huge issue there. Anyway, I would like to go with the original recommendation, which is that council directs staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to allow for the rezoning application RZ 03-2020 outlined in the January 10th, 2022 meeting. I will move that. Do I have a second? Okay, I'll take Maureen. And any further discussion on this? Okay, I'll ask. Okay, go ahead, Sue Ellen.
Just that I won't support that because I'd like to move the one about separating the parcels. So as per the recommendation of the local advisory committee for King Edward Bay Water. So I'd like to, if this motion doesn't pass, then I'll move the next one.
Okay, thank you.
It might be good to deal with that first, because then maybe we could move on to the main motion.
Well,
motion on the table now.
On the table now, it's first and seconded. Any further discussion on this? Then I'll ask the question. All in favor, and we've got Councillor Hawking, I guess, recused. Eh? Okay. All right. So it's a tie. So how does that go?
Defeated.
Defeated.
Oh, it's defeated. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Sue Ellen.
I'd like to move that council direct staff, reading from page 5 of 7 here, right above the number 3, that council direct staff not to proceed with the portion of RZ 03-2020 within the King Edward Bay water system, and that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to allow for the rezoning application RZ 03 2020 over 1676 Malkin Creek Road, legally described as Lot C, District Lot 1545 Plan LMP 3979 PID 017 736986.
Where did you get that, Sue Ellen? Sorry.
I'm in Daniel's report, page 5 of 7, right above the number 3.
Halfway down the page.
Oh, yeah, I got it, yeah.
We have a second on that?
I'm not even sure it, how, maybe Daniel, can you really, now that we've didn't pass the first one, can we do this one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't doing something that was impossible. Okay, thank you.
The motion's been moved.
Okay, a second. Okay, since we have no second, the motion will fail.
I just seconded it.
Who did?
I just seconded it.
You did, Alison?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further discussion on this one?
Could I hear the motion again, please?
Sure.
From
Page-
Hope, please.
Yep, certainly. The council directs staff not to proceed with the portion of RZ 03 2020 within the King Edward Bay water system, and the council directs staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to allow for the rezoning application RZ 03 2020 over 1676 Malkin Creek Road, legally described as Lot C, District Lot 1545, Plan LMP 3979, PID 017 736986.
I'm wondering if it should be flipped, Sue Ellen, to start with proceeding and then to state the exclusion, rather than stating the exclusion and then proceeding.
This is partly what I was meaning, is it's sort of backwards considering what we just did. And I don't see that the meaning would be changed if we started with that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw. As I understand it, Daniel, can you confirm that this would, if we flipped it or if we didn't? And I'm totally happy with flipping it, so let's deal with that now. Is that okay with council? If we start with that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw, that council direct staff not to include the portion RZ03 within the King Edward Bay water system.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, okay. So we have a first and a second on that, and there's a friendly amendment. That's great, thank you.
Thank you. And my question is, for Daniel, I know this is a smaller area. Can you remind me how many lots are in that portion?
4, or potential for 4.
Okay, thank you.
Would those 4 be allowed detached secondary suites? Are they big enough?
Yes, they're big enough.
All right.
Or they will be big enough. They're under subdivision right now.
Okay. Sue Ellen, you still get your hand up as for any comments or not?
Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so I will ask the question. All in favor?
Yeah, it works.
Sorry,
We
just
got-
give me one.
we got
I'm in the
4.
middle of copying and pasting. Let me just do that, and then I'll get your hands. Just one sec. Sorry, can I see those hands again?
This is for in favor?
In favor?
In favor,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep,
Opposed?
thank.
That's it. And Rob and I.
Okay.
Okay, that passes and we will move on.
Actually, could I propose an additional motion? And the additional motion is that council directs staff to resume meetings with the King Edward Bay Local Advisory Council to proceed with the memorandum of understanding.
I'll second that, but can we change that to West Side Water Systems?
Sure.
The 3 West Side Water Systems rather than King Edward Bay?
Okay, it's first and seconded. Hope you have that. Thank you. Any further discussion? Are you okay with that, Liam?
It's already in the work plan.
Yeah, I know, but
Expeditiously.
we just kick it a little bit hard. So I'll ask the question,
Yeah.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, yeah, I guess, David, I was thinking you could probably vote on that one, but
It's
whatever.
for,
Yep.
it's,
In that case, I'm in favor.
Thank you.
I believe it's for David to decide whether he's recused or not, right? Isn't it up to the
Whatever.
Yeah.
person?
Okay,
I
that's
voted-
fine,
I
yeah.
decided and I voted in favor. It's
Thank you.
always in the municipalities and local areas' best interest.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to number 7, which is bylaw 7.1, building bylaw amendment bylaw number 560/2020. Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development. Back to you, Daniel. We're running a little bit late also. So anyway, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So I have for you, for your consideration tonight, bylaw 560, which is a bylaw to amend the building bylaw. So bylaw number 489 is the building bylaw by which we regulate, in essence, the issuance of building permits. And it doesn't directly address capacity issues for lots within municipal service areas for water or for sewer. So it has regulations, like if you're on a septic field, it lays out what needs to be provided, but doesn't directly address the question of, is there capacity within a system to handle a building that's being proposed? Instead, it refers to sort of other bylaws, and you'd have to go and find the bylaw for that local service area and determine what authority exists within that one. So over the past year, staff have been increasingly concerned regarding capacity constraints on the Snug Cove sewer system, and have been seeking a mechanism to be able to refuse to issue building permits should capacity not exist, or I should say more clearly lay out a mechanism to refuse to issue building permits. So the proposed amendment to bylaw number 489 would insert 2 new sections into the building bylaw. So it would have a provision that before applying for a building permit, there'd have to be sufficient water and sewer capacity to service the parcel. And if not, then there would be an option to enter into a covenant permitting the building permit to proceed, but not to issue an occupancy permit until capacity concerns had been addressed. So that could be utilized if there's not presently capacity, but if there's a plan or a capital project underway that would bring about those capacity concerns, then building could continue, knowing that then the occupancy couldn't be issued unless there's adequate water and sewer. So this is that draft bylaw language that was prepared primarily by our legal counsel. So lays out if there's inadequate supply of water or inadequate downstream sanitary sewer capacity for servicing a parcel, it's subject of an application. If the municipal engineer determines there's not capacity, then the building permit may be denied or deferred until there is sufficient capacity, or gives the option for a section 219 covenant, which would preclude occupancy connection to the utility system until capacity exists, as determined by the municipal engineer. So then sort of the harder question is like, what does this relate in particular to the Snug Cove sewer system? So given capacity constraints that exist, should this bylaw be adopted, staff will be rejecting future applications for building permits within the Snug Cove sewer system until capacity is expanded. And staff are preparing essentially a capital plan to bring to the preceding council meeting to outline what that capacity expansion would look like. So current received applications for building permits would also not be permitted under existing bylaw provisions, which specify for a connection to the Snug Cove sewer system to be granted, that there needs to be sufficient excess capacity. Potentially building could occur under a section 219 covenant, which would allow building permits to be issued and building to take place, but not to allow occupancy if capacity has been upgraded. So then the staff recommendation is that bylaw 560/2022, cited as the Bowen Island Municipality Building Bylaw 489, amendment bylaw 560 be read a first, second, and third time. And I'm open for any questions or discussion.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Just for clarification there, this would restrict, it's in the Cove only, the Cove Bay sewer area. Is that correct?
Well, so the bylaw itself would provide a mechanism for any of the municipal systems for that to be in place. Where it's a concern now is the Snug Cove sewer system, but potentially I guess you could see it happen for a water system that doesn't have excess capacity.
Okay, which right now, of course, we only have Cove Bay and Cove Bay Water and Sewer right now, though, eh?
But so any it's not envisioned, but potentially any of the water districts could have a similar situation.
I guess it could for sure.
Private or public?
Sorry, Allison, what was that?
Private or public water district?
No.
We wouldn't have ability to limit over a private system.
But we can't, you're not going to, you can't give out a building permit if they don't prove water, can you?
Yeah, so right now, if it's not a municipal system, then we look for them to determine that there's adequate water before the building permit issuance. This just lays it out for the municipal systems.
But I guess I know we have that in place. But what distinguishes this bylaw to the rest of the bylaws? We already have it in place that you can't have a building permit unless you can prove water and sewer, correct? You have to have North Shore Health or North Shore, whoever it is, sign off on the sewer, correct?
I guess, the difference this makes is one, this more clearly outlines that that's a consideration as part of a building permit application. So for example, in the Snug Cove Sewer District, the building bylaw doesn't address, how to consider sewer. And it just says you need to meet provisions in other bylaws. And then you would look in the Snug Cove Sewer bylaw, which says, well, when you apply to connect, you need to determine if there's excess capacity before giving the permit to connect. So it's a little, for somebody looking to apply and for staff administrator, it's a few steps removed. And our legal counsel recommended that this was a much sort of more straightforward provision, that it's clearly defined as a building permit requirement at time of applying for a building permit.
Okay.
And then the second piece, before I know Liam wants to jump into, is then it clearly outlines and provides a draft covenant and a mechanism then for people to proceed under terms of a covenant.
Yeah. Go ahead, Liam.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just echoing what Daniel said, authority already exists to restrict permitting or approving permits or connections. This just makes it more clear and simpler for both applicants and staff to understand where that authority lies, and also lays out a better pathway as to how you would move forward if you're wanting to do a covenant.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll go Allison first, then Sue Ellen.
Okay, so I'm not totally sure what downstream sanitary sewer capacity means. What's downstream got to do with it?
Downstream simply means, the treatment plant, or it could be a lift station or anything downstream of where your proposed development is.
Okay, so if your development is in a largish lot, but within a sewer system area, then couldn't you put your own septic system in?
Correct, and you would we would seek out a covenant, section 219, that would allow for that development to have a septic system rather than connecting to the sewer because there's inadequate capacity. Similar to what's being proposed for the Bowen Island Health Center.
Okay, I guess I'm not reading it in the context of the whole bylaw, which maybe the way Jay's worded, I was reading it that you were stuck. You had to wait until there was adequate sewer capacity.
Well, to be quite clear, you can't have an occupancy permit unless you have that.
Yeah, but if you can put in your own septic,
Sure.
if you've got a large enough lot and a lot that's adequate for doing that, then this isn't precluding that. That's what I'm wanting to make sure.
Yeah.
No, correct. This would not preclude when we don't have adequate capacity, people to instead treat on site.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel.
Okay.
Is that it, Allison? Or
No, I guess it's the other is adequate. What does adequate mean? or an inadequate supply of water. We've got a section in the land use bylaw that I think says you've got to be able to prove X many liters of potable water, so is that going to be the test for adequate?
Gallons per minute.
I would imagine for water, but
Well, it's talking about in the
Or-
event there is an
yeah.
inadequate supply of water for delivery to the parcel, or an inadequate downstream sanitary sewer capacity.
I mean, some of that it's sort of delegating the authority of that to the municipal engineer to determine, is there sufficient water to meet the anticipated demand, or is there sufficient capacity in, the treatment or the lift station or the pipes to carry the anticipated flows.
Okay, and then my other question had to do with, and I'm just not clear on the costing. I think you talked in the report about $500, or did I pick up that somewhere else?
Yeah, the building bylaw has a charge in it for review and registration of a section 219 covenant.
Okay, so the $500 charge, I can't remember where I found it, but I did ask you about it. Yeah, there's a $500 charge for review and registration. So the municipality pays for the registration of the covenant?
I know, and as I say, we make the applicant register the covenant.
But
yeah,
the $500 charge is for the review and registration of the covenant.
Yeah.
So I haven't actually read the section of the bylaw. So is that, and is the $500 charge to me would just be an adequate charge for the review, and the registration should be at the cost of the applicant, but that isn't clear. And I didn't look at that section in the building bylaw. $500 if it includes the, I don't know, how much does it cost to register a covenant?
It's more how much it costs, like essentially a lawyer has to register the covenant, and that's more the cost.
So that's at least $250.
Yeah, at least, yeah. I don't know if that's the important part of this discussion right now.
Well, I don't know. It just falls into the next discussion.
Well,
yeah. So I was just wanting to clarify that, and maybe the building bylaw needs to be clarified, or the fees section, that the applicant pays for the registration. They pay us $500 to review it. Okay.
Okay, is that it, Allison?
Yeah.
To Ellen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say I'm in support of this motion. I think anything that brings more clarity and fewer surprises will be helpful for any applicant. I also want to reduce the burden on staff to have to explain and find all the pieces and be able to just point to one thing simply. And I think sometimes there are surprises for the municipality as well, when suddenly there isn't the water or the sewer capacity available that we thought there was. And so this just highlights the fact that there are unknowns, and if that should happen, here's the next steps. So I'm in support of this clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Maureen?
Thank you. I'm looking at the building bylaw, section 10.1, which is the section that's being proposed to be amended with this new clause. And under section E and section F, there's a reference to other applicable public authorities for an alternate sewerage system or an alternate potable water supply system. Is there any merit in adding in there public authorities such as Vancouver Coastal Health?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any merit in adding that?
I don't think so.
I'm asking Daniel.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I mean, that, when I read it, I go, that's referring to, in essence, is like that would be the applicable public authority. I mean, later in the sort of requirements for a simple building permit. It lays out what approvals are needed. So the record of sewerage system and the letter of certification as part of a septic field approval. So that's sort of more clearly laid out later in the, like what's required as part of a building permit application.
Okay, just for consideration, I'm not going to push that. And then my second question, this would, if approved, this would apply to current and future potential buildings. Do you have a sense of how many current buildings would be affected by this?
3 current building permit applications that haven't been issued.
3?
3.
And it would apply to them if approved.
I would say yes, but I would say also under current bylaw provisions, staff would not be issuing permits to connect to the Snug Cove sewer system for those applications in any event.
Okay.
Is that correct, Liam?
That's right.
Okay. It's helpful to have the number because I just was curious if there would be 20 odd potential building permits affected by this right off the bat. So thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, Rob, and then I've got Sue Ellen again. Do you want to go again? Okay. So Rob,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So Daniel, is this mainly for clarity's sake? Because we obviously know the sewer, there is no sewer capacity excess. So in effect, are we not allowing any more development right now to be happening in the Cove area?
Yes. That's not able to either provide septic
There's only
fields
septic.
for treatment, or if we would consider, you know, if staff are able to move forward with capital project to expand capacity, then it'd be looking at whether it makes sense to enter into covenants essentially to allow building to proceed in tandem with capacity upgrades.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Michael.
Yes, Daniel, can I ask, is this bylaw rather like holding up a mirror to the current situation at the health center?
No.
What we are proposing here is exactly what is going on with the covenant, etc., with the health center right now. Am I correct?
I mean, yes, it's a slightly different, but yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So we have our position at the health center, and now we're going to have the bylaw to kind of tidy up all the edges, right? Because we have a de facto situation with the health center, which we will have to resolve. Now we've got a bylaw which kind of frames it and mercifully lays down, by the way, some provision for future people or future developments, which quite honestly are not going to happen under the, or most unlikely, I would suggest, to happen, or furthermore, I would say probably will not happen until we get our sewer plant resolved. So I just make the point that what this is something which has come now at a time when we're in the middle of dealing with a very real situation. And I can understand it because frankly, how in the heck can we build anything if we can't give it water and we can't properly provide any sewer capacity? So I mean, it doesn't need 7 geniuses around this table to work that out. But I am a little bit concerned that it seems that I hope that if you want this to go to readings 1, 2, and 3, and we're still about to have a conversation on our real situation here at the health center. And I'm a little bit uncomfortable actually with doing that because the health center came here a long time before this bylaw did.
Michael, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go to Liam for some clarification, and that might help out your situation here. Liam, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just to put it hopefully in clear terms, the health center, you're correct, Michael, has come forward with the project for, we've known about it for quite some time. We've also known for quite some time that there's been a big question mark about the sewer capacity in the cove. And it wasn't until October that we had more certainty around that, and even more recently where we have even more certainty of its limited capacity to take on any new connections. And so we currently have the authority to turn down building permits or connections to the sewer system, but this bylaw will provide more certainty and clarity for that authority to do so. And what we are currently in the position where we cannot be approving any more connections to the system. And so that's the juncture that we're at. We would be not, as staff with our existing authority, we would not be approving any more anyway without this bylaw, but this bylaw just makes it more crystal clear and provides a better pathway and understanding for staff and the public. Additionally, at a staff level, what we would like to be doing is at the next council meeting, we'll be coming forward with a more detailed report illustrating the path forward for expansion of the existing sewer system, the associated costs, and the phasing of that project. So on the January 24th, we'll have much more information about the path forward. And then additionally, what we would be doing is we would be reaching out to the development community that's active on Bowen in the Cove area, as well as realtors and the like, to notify people that we are not entertaining any further connections to the sewer at this time until capacity has been improved and increased. So that's the sort of nuts and bolts of it.
Mayor, I accept Liam's comments 100% on face value. I'm putting myself in the position of someone from the health center who at the moment find themselves in this predicament. So if you're telling me that this bylaw, which is obviously perfectly sensible, because without water and without sewage, you probably ain't going to do a whole lot. However, I just hope, since it's readings, 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
I'm just hoping it's not going to adversely affect the discussion. I'd rather not use negotiation, but the discussions we're having with the health center. They're watching this taking place in parallel with their own situation.
Sorry, Councillor Kale, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The health center is, they're aware of this situation, and so that's why we informed them that we're not able to connect them to the system, and as such, we're seeking the alternative of putting in a septic field. And so we've been working with health center staff on that alternative, and health center is before us tonight to, as they identified in the delegation, to ask for a waiver to the covenant, or at least the fees associated with the covenant. Right. And so the health center is not opposed to having to put in the septic system. They have identified that they will do that and that they recognize and understand the situation. They're before us to ask for a waiver of the covenant.
Okay, so all those things I understand and I support. I just want to know that what we are being asked to approve here does not disadvantage further the position that the people working on the health center find themselves. And if you assure me that it does not, then absolutely, I'm quite happy to support it. But I'm certainly going to make the case here for people who can't speak in this forum and just say, you know, these things are working in parallel. And if you are working on their project right now, this is a fairly daunting project to have this going on as well. It will not affect their position. So let's get on and do it, because who's going to build without water and sewage? So thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I don't see any other hands up there. Sue Ellen?
If you're looking for a mover, I will move it.
Sure, go ahead.
that bylaw number 560/2022, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Building Bylaw number 489/2019, amendment bylaw number 560/2022 be read a first, second, and third time.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye. And that is unanimous. Okay, thank you. We will move on to staff reports. Section 219 Covenant, Septic Covenant, Bowen Island Health Center, 1037 Miller Road. Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development. Okay, Daniel.
Okay. Start this one here. Okay, my final report tonight is about a Section 219 covenant for 1037 Miller, the site of the Bowen, future site of the Bowen Island Health Center. So this is location on Miller next to the currently under construction fire hall, just north of the Four Corners. So in July, the Bowen Island Health Center approached Municipal Council, and Council passed a motion that whereas there may not be capacity in the current Snug Cove sewer system treatment plant to accommodate the health center, and Council doesn't want to delay the start of construction. Apologies. Council directed staff to work with the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation to confirm an appropriate location on the remainder of Lot 3 for a septic field to be used by the health center as an interim solution, and establish the easement and legal agreements required to implement the interim septic field. So after that motion was passed by Council in July, BIM staff met with the health center architect and proponent on site to discuss future locations for a septic field. In September then of that year, given the health center's timing and construction timing and desire to start work on the site, staff issued an excavation permit to allow excavation to continue in advance of the necessary septic field easements and agreements in place. And the health center has continued to work on their building permit application through the fall as work on the site has continued. So I'll note the building bylaw 489 requires for properties that cannot be connected to the sewer system that a building permit application contain a record of the sewerage system has been filed and accepted by VCH, and a copy of the letter of certification for the septic field that takes place. And the health center has not yet developed the plans for their septic field to the point where they're able to provide those records as part of their building permit application. And as such, our building bylaw does not permit the issuance of building permits. So the Bowen Island Health Center wishes to obtain a building permit in advance of submitting that required information and in advance of finalizing the required easements over Lot 3 for the septic field. So when you construct a septic field on a lot separate from where the building takes place, it requires a registered plan outlining the location of the field and necessary easements to give the proponent the right to access the site and to maintain it, and agreements over who maintains the site and whatever else may be in place. So staff proposed it's possible to still issue a building permit through a Section 219 covenant registered on title, such that the health center will not seek occupancy of the building prior to the required septic in place. So the applicant then engaged BIM legal counsel to prepare a covenant stating that the health center wouldn't seek an occupancy permit. So after the applicant had this prepared, BIM staff reviewed it and had no issues with the wording, as did the applicant at the time it was placed on the agenda. In terms of financial implications, so the applicant has stated they intend to seek a grant from the Bowen Island municipality to cover the fee and associated legal charges, with the covenant estimated at a total amount of up to $2,500. So staff, as the report notes, don't support this recommendation, feeling that this is a cost associated with development and should be borne by the user. But should council wish to provide such a grant, staff recommend council make the following motion that I've outlined in the report. And so the recommendation is that council authorize staff to register the restrictive covenant on 1037 Miller Road. I'll stop sharing at that point.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Who wants to start this one? I would say that, let's we had a delegation tonight, and that reflected on this. And I think we have to be careful and just use what we're looking at here. And to my mind, this is going to be an $8 million project. I don't think $2,500 is going to break the bank. And I also think that I don't understand the reluctance to sign this covenant, which could have probably been signed 3 weeks ago or a month ago. Time is money. We found that out on the community center. There's absolutely no question. Every day costs a huge amount of money, and I think we've given them an opportunity to move ahead, and I don't think I don't think they have a valid reason for not doing that. But that's my thought. And
just Mr. Mayor, in terms of timing, so I believe that we had discussed with the health center in sort of mid-December timing that this would be an option for the building permit to be issued. And they had legal counsel work on it over essentially the break between Christmas and New Year's, which is when I wrote the report. So it is coming to the next council meeting after we had outlined this as a solution to go forward. And it is a covenant that needs to be approved by council. So this was, in terms of timing, this was our opportunity to bring it to council.
I take back my remarks about wasting time then. Thank you, Daniel. Hey, David.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Daniel. So obviously this is a really unfortunate situation that we, suddenly found that we knew we were running short of sewage capacity, and I was hoping that most of us were hoping there was still sufficient for this, for the health center, but to find that it's not. For them to then build a septic system, that's a great solution, but the tricky part then is to bear the costs of building a septic system, decommissioning the septic system, and then joining the sewer system. And it's calling it an interim septic system. We know that any builder would struggle to have to do both. So first of all, the interim septic system, whereabouts is it on lot 3? Like, does it have to be interim? Could that be the solution for a good while? Whereabouts is it on lot 3, Daniel, please?
So it's essentially at the furthest extent of lot 3 back from the road, adjacent to where Birch's lot would be. Having said that, like that's where staff and health center staff identified on site as a site visit. But a septic professional hasn't drawn up the filing plan at this point to confirm. So, sort of we outlined a location we believed was large enough and adequate to handle a septic field, but that hasn't been confirmed. Like somebody hasn't designed a field for that location.
Yeah, we haven't had a septic specialist or professional on site to confirm that.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Obviously, yeah, that has to be figured out first. But I'm just going back to the covenant, and it's at item 5, where the second sentence, no, it's all in the first sentence. The covenantor shall, on Bowen's request, make commercially reasonable efforts to connect the lands and any buildings thereon to Bowen's municipal sewer system, and then at the covenantor's own expense, and so on, and pursue it to any regulations and so on, and fees and so on. And we know that's an enormous burden to be able to have to do both. So yep. I guess I'm reiterating my question about, does it have to be an interim? Can we not require them to connect to the sewer system? Although I recognize the language in this is somewhat flexible. They don't have to connect. They have to make commercially reasonable, I don't know what that means, commercially reasonable efforts to connect. So back to that a little bit, Daniel, and Liam, is there a way of helping them so they don't have to do both?
Right. Daniel, I can take a crack at it if you want to add to what I have to say. So thank you, Councillor Hocking. It's a good question, and we agree that it is a significant burden for the project to take on, and it's not something that we would want anyone to have to do. It's a tall request. However, the health center is at a critical juncture, and moving forward at this time is an important step, as they can't wait longer to see or to wait for us to increase capacity at the wastewater treatment plant. So they need to move forward. It then encumbers the land that we are providing for that sewer. So if we have desires for use of that land for any other use other than a septic field, we then don't have access to that land. And so there may be other opportunities for use of that land in the future that we wouldn't want to be encumbered by a septic field that would be there for 30+ years. So on the one hand, a septic field could serve the facility for a long period of time, but on the other hand, is that the best use of that land for the municipal interests? Perhaps it is. Perhaps it can accommodate other development in that area as well, if the sewage treatment plant isn't able to take on additional capacity in a timely manner. So the covenant actually allows for that flexibility for the municipality. And the municipality is not a for-profit entity. It's not looking to gain here in any way, shape, or form other than improve the services that the residents of Bowen enjoy. And therefore, the municipality supports this project 100%. And, perhaps keeping the septic field in place for a duration of time is the most beneficial thing to do. Perhaps keeping the medical facility off the sewage treatment plant enables capacity for others. So there's a whole suite of options that can unfold from moving forward in this direction. And we definitely recognize the burden on the project, but it requiring the facility to then connect when capacity is sufficient may well be the best thing for Bowen, because that property or that land may be better suited for something other than a septic field. And the covenant also ensures that the applicant will, in fact, develop a septic field and not come back and identify that they should have the rights to be connecting to a sewage treatment plant. I'm not implying that the medical center, the health center foundation would ever do such a thing. But, for the municipality, it's important for us to get things confirmed in writing and with certainty to know that when the project is completed and they're seeking an occupancy permit, that we know with certainty that it is a septic field that they will be pursuing, and not coming back and saying, well, here's our connection to the sewer treatment plant. Again, I don't imply that they would do that, but it's the level of a protection that the municipality previously didn't really achieve with projects. And I think we're trying to get to a place where we're having greater levels of certainty and confidence in all the things that we're doing. So.
Yeah, thanks, Liam.
Thanks, Liam.
Those are good answers. And I just one further question. I appreciate, yes, that, if the septic field is using some of that land, then it means it's not available for other potential uses that may be valuable for the community. But can I then ask just a little more clarification about the words that I said, and I'll read them again. So in point 5, that the health center shall, on Bowen's request, make commercially reasonable efforts to connect the lands in any buildings thereon to the sewage system. What does that mean? Commercially reasonable efforts. That suggests that it'll be financially sound, and it doesn't look very financially sound. Help me understand what that term is, and does that give the health center the flexibility they need to be able to move forward?
I think, so the lawyer prepared this covenant for the health center to some extent, but I guess how I read that is that if we were to request it and say, okay, these are the charges, it leaves open some room for discussion that if the health center came back and said, well, we can't pay that, we'll go bankrupt. Or, we can't, there's no way that, that's not a reasonable request, and that there's some room for discussion at that point. I think that's my reading.
Yeah, David, you're.
Sorry, David.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I'll step to the side and hear from other folks now. Thank you. But you can see the direction we need to help them somehow. Certainly happy to come up with the $2,500, but it seems to me we need more than that. Thanks.
Okay. Who is next in here? Allison?
So just following up on David's comments, I mean, this isn't a commercial operation, so using the word commercially reasonable. But I'm going back to clauses 2B and 3B. The covenantor has installed a septic system on the lands. The lands are the lot that the Health Center Foundation has bought. My understanding is that the temporary system, which could end up being permanent, is not going to be on land that was purchased by the health center. So if it takes 5 years or 7 years or 10 years to get the sewer system upgraded, and meanwhile they're ready for an occupancy permit in 3, they haven't met the conditions of B, which has a septic system on the lands. And the lands are clearly defined in the clause 1, like clause A under background. So I think that wording is wrong to start with.
What are the lands? I guess that's a big
The lands are the lot they bought.
Well,
That's very clearly lot 2, district lot 490, group 1, New Westminster district, the lands. That's in recital A under background.
oh, okay.
Right, so that clause could say on the lands or neighboring lands.
Lands or adjacent land or on suitable lands, or, but it can't say on the lands.
Well, on designated lands?
Well,
But I mean,
yeah,
it
it can't be the lands, which it could be on designated property or something.
Yeah,
Now, my other question has to do, the library septic field. Is that being decommissioned because it's right in the middle of where all the runoff is going to be dealt with?
It has been decommissioned.
Well,
And
it's been unhooked, but it's been actually dug up.
It is basically where all the drainage from the medical center, the proposed Birch project, and
Okay,
the fire hall. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I thought.
exactly.
I thought that
Yeah.
it was not fire hall drainage. It's the other two's drainage.
All 3 drainages will end
Yeah.
up there.
Okay. All right. So that answers that question. What other question? So I missed the comment about we haven't identified an area on lot 3 yet, or we've identified one but haven't tested it as to whether it's suitable.
Yeah, so we with the health center identified, where it would go, where we believe it would go, but like the septic filing hasn't been done and that area hasn't been defined, and so there's a chance a septic professional may come and say, oh, it doesn't fit here, but if you turn it 90 degrees and go more this way, it'll work better. So it's roughly defined in our minds, but it's not finalized.
Okay. And you can't have per impervious surfaces on top of septic fields, but can you have gravel parking lots on top of septic fields?
No, I don't think you can drive on a septic field.
No.
They're low enough. Okay.
Is that it, Allison?
Yeah, there could be some other use put to that septic field lot,
Maybe a field.
like a playing field or, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Sue Ellen?
I think Maureen was first, but I'll be happily go because I'm just going to be brief. This really helps because I was confused by the bit about the lands, and then I was going, but where would it go? So now I think what I'm hearing, and maybe you could tell me if I'm correct, because I have total sympathy for these hardworking volunteers, and they're doing this wonderful work for the community. And some of the words I heard in the delegation really resonate with me, like partnership and good governance and demonstrating support. And those things I think we've done as a municipality all the way along. We've made the land available. I think we did a bunch of work with the rezoning and the planning and the layout of the lands. And it's my impression that we've been very supportive. And now I'm hearing that we've had this situation come up where there's not enough room in the septic sewer system, which has been a surprise to all of us. And we're working together. Staff have been out there with the health center team already. And maybe I've got this wrong, but it sounds like the burden on the project is lessened by municipality is offering to make Bowen Island municipal land available for this temporary septic bed. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the council direction in July, was to make additional land available for the septic.
Yeah. Okay, good. So thank you. I just wanted to have that all clear, because I think that's significant. And I like the way that the covenant is worded to give some flexibility there, depending on how we are able to resolve these sewer system issues over time, and how everything is going to be resolved in the long term, which we can't exactly know. So they've got some flexibility in there. But this again is clarity for perhaps the health center board, maybe 20 years from now, who knows, right? It's laid out, it's clear, it's a sort of agreement, and I'm in support of this for those reasons, and because it helps us all overcome this situation, which we are in. And nobody likes surprises, but here we are. And so I think this is a positive step forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Maureen?
Thank you, Gary. Just want to check a couple of facts. The material from the Health Center Foundation says that the additional load on the sewer system would be the equivalent of 10 additional people in the on the system. Is that considered 10 additional households, or is it 10 people? Daniel, do you know?
It's given the equivalent of 10 people.
So it's not households.
No, so it's like, yeah.
Okay, so then my question is, and I brought this up at least once in the past. My question is whether there is any unutilized capacity where people have a connection to the sewer and they are definitely not going to be using it in the meeting.
Oh, I think we've just lost Maureen.
Okay.
Maureen, if you can hear us, you're frozen.
Term, say,
There you go.
over 5 years. Has that already been done? So my closing point there was just, has there been an assessment to see whether there is any of that give that could potentially be reassigned to the health center project?
So I mean, our Patrick is here as well to speak to it, but in essence, the treatment plant is at capacity now. So if there are people who are connected where, the house is vacant, or, so that they aren't generating the same flows as other users, if they were to sell it to somebody to use it, the plant would be at higher, like above capacity. So it's not that sort of our count of the users on the system is reaches capacity, but rather it's the flows that are entering the treatment plant.
Okay, I see. It's a functional problem. And then my second question is whether Birch has done any work on its septic plans. Do you know, Daniel?
I don't know. It was something we had discussed with the health center when we were on site, that where the health center septic would be, ideally there would be room for a Birch septic field, adjacent to it as well. I don't know until probably that septic work is done, if that's possible. Sort of where we had looked is at the back of lot 3 as it falls down, sort of next to Birch. And it's sort of a defined area that's sort of below the rock outcroppings. The septic load of the Birch development would be much greater than the health center. So we probably need a corresponding larger area. So I don't know if the area at the back has room for both. But it's something sort of is alive in our minds, is that, okay, if Birch is able to develop, that they may be looking at a similar solution.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Maureen. Allison, I still see your hand up.
Yeah, 2 questions. So what the report we got from Urban Systems on the sewer capacity, that report, if I recall correctly, said that the sewer system was operating at 75% capacity. So my question is, what do we have to, which I've asked and never had an answer to, is what needs to be done to make it run at 100% capacity? And I'm hoping that would be addressed in this report that's coming forward from staff on the January 24th meeting. The other question, I guess, is in Daniel's resolution. You've said that council authorized staff to register a restrictive covenant. So that means we're going to register the covenant and we're going to pay for it. To me, if the applicant's going to pay for it, then it's got to say that council authorized staff to have a restrictive covenant registered on the property, paid for by the applicant. So at this point, I think our resolution authorizes us to pay for at least the registration of the covenant. So anyhow, those are my comments.
Okay, Daniel, any comment on that?
No, I just tried to copy language from similar resolutions for covenants.
Which is why I've always thought we paid for it.
Okay, Michael?
Yes, Mayor, what I want to ask is, perhaps Liam or Daniel can help me. All this conversation is not materially moving us forward in respect to the health center. Where are we in our discussions with their principals about resolving this? Who is talking to whom? Could someone just brief me in? I don't need to hear about flows here. The flow I want to hear is a conversational flow. And where is that taking place? And where are we here to try and mediate, resolve, and come to a solution that works? Because obviously the current one doesn't seem to be doing too well. So where are we, if I may ask, perhaps Liam, you could brief us on where are we with those conversations?
So thanks, Councillor Kale. Essentially, staff continue to, well, staff, it's predominantly Daniel, myself, and Patrick, who continue to engage with Tim Rhodes on the project. When project is reaching a certain milestone, Tim keeps us informed. And likewise, if certain issues come up, Tim reaches out to us to seek resolution. And so effectively, you know, Tim provided a timeline that was as part of the delegation package, which identifies, you know, all of the sort of larger back and forth between ourselves. And where we're at is the health center is ready to, you know, they're seeking their building permit. And in order to secure the permit, we, the municipality, are trying to ensure that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And as part of that, we would require this covenant. And Tim and the board have expressed concern in part about the cost of the covenant, but also concern that they would have to build the septic system and then in the future decommission it and connect to the wastewater treatment plant. So those are additional costs that they were not planning for. And so, you know, this most recent conversation that got us to this juncture about whether we need the covenant or not just happened last week. Not sure if that's answering your question, Councillor Kale.
Well, what I'm wondering is this: as with any of these sort of log jams that we get, if there's any light on the horizon at all, firstly, there is a temporary field that one way or another we could connect. Whether that becomes permanent or not, frankly, I don't know. No more than anybody I'm looking at on this screen knows when the new sewer plant will be actually up and running and commissioned. There's a lot of don't knows. And in the meantime, you've got a group of people who are responsible for donated money from this community, and they're trying to move their project ahead. And I don't think us as a council talking about flows is actually neither here nor there. What we need is a solution that helps them move forward. And as you quite rightly said, doesn't put the council, doesn't put us, the municipality, in a disadvantageous position, but we can come to some agreement. Now, I've seen adversarial groups come to terms, massive near warfare on these things, but we're not working with an adversarial group. We're working with people from our own community. So I guess I'm staring at my screen and saying, please, couldn't someone sit down and get us to a stage where these excellent people can move forward with their project, recognizing that this is an arrangement done to facilitate just that. And then, surely, as part of that arrangement, and it may be slightly complex, really intelligent people who are very well intentioned, we all live on the same island, I think I'm right in saying, surely we can come to some agreement, because I am actually not amused by being confronted by this, because I got to ask, surely we can negotiate and talk our way around this. And we need to do it as a matter of urgency, even if it is a bridging situation we reach, even if it recognizes that it was done deliberately to get us from step 1 to step 2, and to protect the interests of all parties. But if you are, as these group are, responsible for this donated money, I can see why they're looking at that covenant done by our lawyers, of course, and shaking their heads. We need to be a little more I'm asking for some help, please, in getting us where we need to go quickly, with and recognizing the situation so we can all move ahead. This is not a distinguished conversation that I hear so far. It's a question, it's almost academic. We know what the situation is. What we need to be focused on is how we resolve it. And that's the help I'm asking for from everybody, and saying we need to resolve, not debate, or not to get into any form of acrimony. We're dealing with a group of people we all know. Now, come on, surely, Liam, is it not possible to set up a group to negotiate and get ourselves, not negotiate, but to come to some interim arrangement so everyone can move forward with such T's crossed and I's dotted as is relevant, because that is what we need to do as a council.
So the question is before Mayor and Council, Councillor Kale, and that is like whether or not to require the covenant, and if yes, we do require the covenant, whether or not to provide a grant of $2,500 to the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation to cover the fees and associated legal charges, and for issuing the covenant. So that's the question to council.
And sorry, just
this actually is a solution in my mind. I don't know why people aren't understanding that.
Can we hear from Daniel?
I'm listening to the presentation this evening. The other party obviously didn't see it as a solution.
So I guess I would say, like in staff's mind, this is the solution. So in the summer, council gave direction to use part of lot 3 for the septic field. The health centers developed their building permit plans, but has not, the septic field information is not at the same stage, and so they're ready. They're getting close to ready for a building permit issued, but haven't done the septic field. So absent this covenant, we would not be able to issue a building permit for the health center. So sort of when presented with that challenge, this was staff's solution for that problem. And we're able to bring it to the next council meeting.
And this was laid out in August with a very clear letter from myself to Tim in terms of the requirements to get the excavation permit, and then proceeding beyond that, the possible limitations of sewerage capacity that would then, if we didn't have it, would require all the necessary easements and covenants. And Tim knows it. He covered it in his own timeline. So it's not new news to the health center that we would require a covenant if we couldn't get them onto the sewer system, the existing treatment plant. So this is not something we've just sprung on them in December. This was addressed back in August. And so here we are today saying, okay, well, we can't accommodate you. Unfortunately, we would love to, but we can't. And so we need you to go forward with the septic system option. But that work has not been advanced to the level that we would normally require it to be advanced. And so if they want their building permit now, we say, okay, that's fine. We're willing to give it to you, but with this covenant. And that's the normal process. And so we're here before you today to ask, does mayor and council, do they approve the covenant, and do they wish to provide a grant of $2,500 to the foundation to cover the costs associated with the covenant? We're not here talking about whether or not septic system or wastewater treatment plant. We're talking about the covenant.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Liam. I'm going to go Maureen, David, and then Tim wants to say something, and I'm going to, it's a little irregular, but I will go to Tim after you two.
Thank you, Gary. Did I mishear something at some point? Daniel, did you say that the Health Center Foundation was prepared to sign the covenant?
No.
So when this was placed on the agenda, we did that after getting the approval from the health center that they were prepared to enter into the covenant. Hence the agenda was published with the covenant. Subsequent to that, I received further amendments they might like, and we had some back and forth. But the language came, via the lawyer from the Health Center Foundation, who then confirmed approval with the covenant.
Okay, so substantive agreement with the covenant. And then the second point, Councillor Hawking has already indicated his preference to we pick up the $2,500 cost, which is not much for the Health Center Foundation, but it's also not much for the municipality. So I think we probably have two things before us to probably vote on separately. The acceptance of the covenant, moving forward with that, and then separate issue of will we cover the costs involved. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Maureen. David?
Thank you, Gary. So good discussion. I certainly agree that we need the covenant. It's the proper process to move forward. And I certainly agree that we could cover the costs. But the issue that I've heard, I guess, most strongly from the group, from the health center group, is the double costs of building one system and then having to decommission it and build the other one. Now, Liam's answer was a good one about well, can it, it takes some of the land from lot 3 and it's using it for, it restricts our ability to use the rest of lot 3 for other things. However, when I look at that, we looked at lot 3 for things that the community needs. We need a healthcare center. We need the affordable housing, if that can move forward. We needed the fire hall, and we need the community center further up the road. And we were willing to put land aside for that. Because the sewer system did not work for us the way we wanted it to, it unfortunately means we need to provide more land right now, and maybe for a long while for the health center. So I'm interested in looking at the covenant and maybe looking at those words, again, the words I've said several times in point 5, that talks about then, okay, going to the joining up with the sewage system and the cost that that involves. Whether that point is flexible enough as it stands right now, or whether it needs to be more flexible. Recognizing, from my perspective, recognizing that because of the unfortunate situation with the sewage system, we actually do need to provide more land, and it might be more land for both Birch and the health center. So I guess I'm putting that forward to council members as recognizing that it's going to be more than an interim solution. Who knows what's going to happen 10 or 15 years down the road, but it's certainly going to be a 10-year solution at least. I'd like other thoughts.
Okay, thanks, David. We're going to go to Tim, and then we'll open it up again. Tim, go ahead. Tim?
You're muted.
You're muted, Tim.
That's better.
We didn't receive actual confirmation that we wouldn't get into the sewer until the end of October, and we have started on the work about a septic field, but that's a long process, as you can imagine. And we have, if we have to sign this covenant to get our building permit, we will sign the covenant. We'll sign it with, objections to the things that we do object to in it, but we will sign it because it's absolutely urgent to get the permit and keep things moving. We will be in, we have to keep our contractor and we have to keep the work flowing. Our biggest concern is getting the contract. We have no problem signing a covenant that will put a septic field in place. That's absolutely never been an issue. In fact, we're the ones who proposed it. There are things about this covenant, as I've spoken to, that we don't like, but if that's what we have to do to move the project forward, we'll do it, but with objections.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I like that part on that part number 5 that David was talking about. I like the idea, and I don't know if the flexibility is in there that the health center could keep perhaps that septic field. I don't know how the municipality feels about it, Patrick, and that sort of thing. If that would be an option at that time, and I don't know whether section 5, it says on Bowen's request, so that I think leaves the ball in our court. I need some clarification on that, but I don't think we're going to force anybody onto our septic system and the sewer system, and it would be nice if you could keep the thing and not have to take it down. That way, I think the cost of hookups onto the sewer system minus the cost of maybe the septic field would probably be a bit of a wash there. So that would be a good option. The other ones are to when we talk about the lands, I think we have to straighten that out in that covenant. And Allison, you had a couple other little points in there. You didn't want to.
I could have suggested wording for 2B and 3B in the chat.
Okay.
Because that has to be fixed. And then I'm not sure whether, I just don't like the word commercially, but I don't know what else to put in there.
And may I just add something, Gary?
Sure, go ahead.
Commercially reasonable efforts is a term of art. It's set language that lawyers use. And this is what it means. It's at a level less than best efforts and is generally interpreted as requiring the party to exert substantial effort without requiring that the party take any action that would be unreasonable under the circumstances. So the short definition is efforts that are reasonable in the circumstances, all things being considered. That's what's meant.
So, but we need a lawyer here to say if that's, you know,
Thanks, Maureen.
if that works or not. It seems to me like it would work. I think the part on Bowen's request, I think that leaves it up the ball in our court, really, about what has to happen. Yeah, those other little corrections. Hope, did you manage to pick those up or not? Oh, no way.
So I have the two that Councilor Morse has suggested, and then in section 5.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we did anything there. I think we decided that commercially reasonable efforts is probably the bottom end of the effort.
Yeah,
Is
so
that-
I don't have any recorded change for that. Just the 2 and 3B.
What if we check commercially reasonable, commercially out of there? Make reasonable efforts to connect it can't be, yeah.
Commercially reasonable reduces the requirement.
Yeah.
It's a meaningful difference.
Oh, it
Yeah.
is. It goes that way, so we'll leave commercially in there.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
May I ask, Tim mentioned that there were some concerns that the Health Center Foundation had to the language of the covenant. Daniel, are you able to summarize those for council's consideration? Do you recall?
You're muted, Daniel.
Sorry, let me pull up.
If we're tweaking the language of the covenant, and we can tweak it to accommodate some of the suggested changes, we might as well do it all at once.
Correct.
I see the CAO's hand is up too, by the way, just in case you didn't see it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I received some edits essentially Friday afternoon.
Okay.
I'm just trying to look through. So one was that it would be within 3 years of Bowen's request to make the commercially reasonable efforts to connect to the lands. And then it would say, including payment of any fees or capital contributions as negotiated by the covenanter and Bowen. And it would.
Where was that, Daniel?
Sorry, that's in clause 5.
Okay. And it is what again?
As negotiated by the covenanter and Bowen, as due or owing at that time. So rather than that may become due or owing at that time.
So it would read, including payment of any fees or capital contributions as negotiated between the covenantor and Bowen, period.
As due or owing at that time, period.
No, but they become due or owing if they're agreed. So I would just say as agreed.
Right.
Period.
All right, can you just repeat that last one, Daniel?
That's the last sentence, yeah.
Yeah, the last sentence, or the last, after the last comment, including payment of any fees or capital contributions as negotiated by the covenanter and Bowen.
As negotiated between.
Yeah, as negotiated by the covenanter and Bowen.
No, between the covenantor and Bowen.
I could copy and paste into the chat.
Thanks.
Daniel, can you repeat that 3-year comment that you mentioned? What does that entail?
Sorry, when I copy it in, it copies the track changes in. Which doesn't.
They want 3 years in order to do the decommissioning and connection.
Well, yeah. What they're saying is it they want a minimum of 3 years on the field?
No, sorry, the 3 years is so that upon our request that there's a period of time for the health center to connect. So if we approached and said, we'd like you to connect to the sewer system and pay the fees at that point, that there's a defined period for them to raise funds to connect.
Okay.
That doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
No, it doesn't seem unreasonable.
Um,
And then there would be an inserted clause 7 that would indemnify the covenantor.
So that would be under,
That's-
so you'd have a clause 7 and then renumber 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah.
I guess the only issue with the 3 years is if that we did want to do something with the land, let's say we sell it off, that whoever buys it wouldn't be able to maybe do anything with that property for 3 years because there'd be that time gap that that the health center could raise that money. So, I mean, that could be a significant delay for anybody wanting to look at maybe purchasing a property like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that any connection would have to be sort of a planned, it's like if there's a planned upgrade to the sewer plant that's underway, it would be a discussion almost beforehand with the health center in terms of are they included or not. And if they're going to be included, then giving notice for them, to connect at a future date when the capacity is there. So it seems like a 3-year term is completely reasonable and probably would take place, even without a clause, there would be a time period involved.
Yes, yeah.
And just even in terms of sort of our capital work and planning for it, is that, well, we would plan for the expansion to include the health center, it would be underway and then it would be connected.
So you're comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you got that part of it, Hope? The 3 years? Okay, where do we insert that then?
I think it would just be easier if Daniel, who has the changes, could just email them to me and I can insert them. I have a few of them that have been discussed here, but the ones that were discussed previously by email between the health center and Daniel, I don't have readily available. I'm not sure what's in the chat is what's exactly being changed. So it might be easier for Daniel and I to work those.
All right,
out.
I can, yeah.
And okay, so do you want to send those out as corrections or as amendments before, or do we want to vote on it now and we confirm we can't really vote on it now then, can we? So there's going to be a whole bunch of amendments.
yeah.
Well, I think Daniel's just explained the amendment, so we can approve it as amended
Yeah.
if council's comfortable with that.
No, I certainly am. It's all in favor of the health center pretty much. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, no, listen, I appreciate that we're moving this conversation along as I suggested. The only thing we're doing this on the fly and in the middle of a regular council meeting is that we're not having a two-way conversation with the health center. So I'm glad to hear that we're doing what we're doing and appreciate that. But this is a very awkward mechanism to do in the middle of a council meeting, and I'm just wondering whether this could be taken off for a separate meeting. It just seems a very difficult way, and I'm getting no real feedback. And it would be good to hear again from Tim Rhodes, but again, you're making him act as spokesman for a lot of people. And I just question this process as it goes along right now. I think it's for the good. It's for the good because we're moving it. But
we're trying to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And I respect that. I'm just asking it. Do we almost need to take a recess so that we can actually kind of group with these people and get some proper feedback and get something that's more meaningful, and we're not missing out stuff as we go along. This is a very difficult way of handling it.
Well, I agree, but there's also apparently some time constraints here. Maureen, going to go to you.
Yeah, I agree that it is a little difficult to amend on the fly, but as you said, I'm sensitive to the timing issue. I'm wondering if it would be sufficient to, I mean, both parties have to sign off on this covenant, do they not?
Yes.
So I'm wondering if it would be sufficient to move this forward as amended and then have the discussion if there is, sorry, my cat has joined us. If there is an issue, that it come back to us at a subsequent council meeting rather than prolonging it, which would probably take another 2 council meetings.
Well, that's what we certainly don't want to do. I don't know how happy I am with that, because if we register the covenant, well, the recommendation is that authorize staff to register the covenant. We can't register it as amended unless we'd like to see it before it gets registered. I mean, there's no question about
I think
that.
we could change the motion to that council amend the restrictive covenant as amended at the, where are we? January 10th, 2022 council meeting, and then authorize staff to register the amended covenant, etc.
Well, that would be good. Can we do that can we do that on electronically?
Let's do it right now.
We would do it right now.
Oh, okay, good. Let's do it.
So what are you suggesting? Because I was going to suggest we could ask for a revised covenant to be prepared as discussed at the meeting and to be circulated to council and ratified for electronic vote.
Well, that's another option, yeah.
But Michael's point is to make sure that both parties are comfortable with
Exactly.
the covenant. So it's not just that we're prepared to move with it.
Which my option would do, because it would give staff time to discuss the changes with the applicant.
Yes, yes, it would. It would indeed, Alison. Absolutely.
I support that approach. I think we've all heard what we're trying to do here. It needs to be worked out, both parties, and then get that circulated to council so that we can demonstrate our.
Circulated to council and the health center.
Well, yeah, the health center would agree, and then it would get sent to us.
How does that sound to everybody, and what does it look like as a recommendation? Oh, have you got anything at all?
That council directs staff to amend the restrictive covenant for 1037 Miller Road as discussed at the January 10th regular council meeting, and to circulate the revised covenant for council approval.
And
Can you add a clause about and review with the Health Center Foundation and then circulate the revised?
Right. Good, Alison.
Yeah.
Your first clause was good and your last clause was good. You need to add a.
Tim, how
So
does it sound?
as discussed at the January 10th meeting, review with the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation and circulate the revised covenant to council for approval.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Yep, a third it.
Tim's sitting there with his hand up. I'm just going to ask him if that's.
Took it down.
Like, he's going to stand still up there.
Oh, you put it up again.
Yes, if the revisions as discussed, I have no hesitation in suggesting they would be acceptable to the health center. Our only concern is that this get turned around as quickly as possible. So
Absolutely, 100%.
Yep, yep.
thank you.
Within 24 hours or something, Tim?
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we do amazing.
Daniel does amazing.
Okay, I will. So we got that first and seconded. Any further discussion on this lengthy topic? If not, I will ask the question. All in favor? Aye.
All right.
All right. So we got a full house there. That's great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Tim.
Thank
And,
Okay, there's one more motion.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
2,500.
That motion
Okay.
is that council provide a financial grant of an amount not to exceed $2,500 to the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation for the fees and associated legal charges with executing the septic covenant on 1037 Miller Road.
Okay, I'll move that.
Second
Mike,
that.
like I do is it number 2 and ask a question, all in favor? Aye.
Hold on.
Just-
What is the source of the funding? Where is it coming from?
We don't have a CFO.
Oh, sorry. The source of the funding?
Yeah.
It just be coming from general revenue.
General rev, yeah.
That's fine. Just want to make sure it's specified.
Oh,
Thank-
okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So let's say that again. All in favor? Aye. Okay, and we got a full house there too. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, we're going to move on to correspondence, which we have none. Reports of committees, commissions. Councillor Nicholson and Hawking read recommendations from the Housing Advisory Committee meeting. Council approve the work plan. Okay, so you want to take that on, Maureen, or?
Sure.
Mike?
And this is coming from myself and Michael?
Yes.
Not me, yeah.
Yeah, no, David's not on that committee.
Why
So
did I-
this is our work plan for the.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's the one that was corrected. I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the work plan for the coming year. The only question I've received up to this point is from Councillor Morse. She asked if what is being proposed here was consistent with what was in the island plan, section A1, and it's probably got more stuff in it than the island plan does. But the core things that are in the island plan having to do with building the affordable housing reserve, making sure that structurally it's that's going to be happening, and that there is a housing policy as opposed to just an affordable housing policy is in the works. So what the island plan proposed last year for this strategic commitment was to work on identifying and addressing barriers to housing diversity in the OCP and LUB, that work is ongoing, and it is. New housing options are available through housing agreements, and new housing developments are underway, for example, Birch. So there haven't been, as far as I can recall, any additional housing agreements concluded in this calendar year, but I'm assuming that the Grafton Lake Affordable Home Ownership agreements will be coming forward for council review. That's in development, and that has gone to the Housing Advisory Committee. Birch, as we know, was unsuccessful with its application to BC Housing and is seeking support through CMHC low-cost construction loans, some other name, but I can't quite remember. And a revised housing policy is underway. So the strategic priority, we really recognize that these were longer term undertakings, and they are moving forward, but not concluded at this point. Michael, did you want to add to that at all, or?
No, I think for the sake of brevity, that's where we are. The work plan speaks for itself, Maureen. I think, and as you said, it is more comprehensive, obviously, than I think what we have in our island plan. You'd expect that, and QED on that, and it's now a matter of seeing where that's going to take us, especially now. We're aware of some constraints that we have in the area where we'd most like to achieve some density. So we have some workarounds to do. So that's it.
Thank you, Michael. Michael, Maureen, I see some questions out there. Allison first, and then over to Sally.
Okay, so two questions. One is, I think it's a formatting question. Under section 5, you've got point 3, which says two-tiered zoning to encourage desired housing outcomes, comma, for example, colon.
Yeah.
And then there's a point 4.
Yeah, it's a formatting issue.
So point 4 the little 4 should be.
It's a bulleted point under 3.
It should be deleted.
Yeah.
It should be, yeah,
Just the IV. The extra floor area is the example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so in the final version, it needs, the little 4 needs to be removed. And the other is on the policy. So under 9A, review existing affordable housing policy. I guess part of my trouble with that was it wasn't matching the wording in the strat plan. And you've said report on how it has been used. That's good. What can be changed or not? Well, everything can be changed. So to me, the wording needs to be what needs to be changed or updated.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. We have an advisory, housing advisory meeting this week, so we'll get that sorted.
Okay.
Thanks, Ellen. Sue Ellen?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is about 2A. I'm just wondering if you could explain a bit more about this. Does this mean for the smaller lots, like around Melmore or something, you're thinking about looking at the potential for putting smaller secondary suites on those detached ones? And what does the word staff mean beside that?
Oh, it just meant that it was flagged as particularly important for staff to be looking at, and also that they had already done a little bit of work. Again, if you remember back to the committee of the whole that we had, we discussed the possibility of reducing the
Lot size
for secondary suites. So this is to do a bit more research into that and to see whether it actually makes sense to do so. So for staff, for example, could look at the potential impact of reducing the lot size to 0.75 or looking at 0.50 and how many more potential secondary suites could be yielded with different kinds of adjustment. And not saying whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but just looking at what the impact would be.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. I'm partly was just the only one that had staff beside it in red, and I just wanted to be clear about what that meant. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sue Ellen. Any other questions on this? Yeah, in research how to develop more secondary suites and already developed properties. I don't know. You just got to make the properties smaller. I guess that's the other part of that. I don't know.
That one, Gary, came from a very good remark about making the best of what we have, and really looking for opportunities within existing large. This was not going to be the silver bullet, but it was a very astute point made by one of the developers to actually look at some of those big lots that we've got and look at the opportunities contained within. So it was a point well taken by everybody at the on the committee there.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny because it seemed like we had a whole bunch of empty buildings around that we weren't utilizing. Is that sort of the way that direction was going?
Well, if we have, that's one thing. But
Wouldn't that be nice?
I think there was a whole lot of physical opportunities to actually, with the lots that we have, maybe do more. Look at the spaces we have. The wise words.
Yes, I don't know. I'd buy into that. Sue Ellen?
Thank you. I have another question, and that is just, please excuse me if this has been talked about recently, but I would like to get a sense of, if we know, how many, what's the uptake for these secondary suites possibilities that we have created so far, and how are they tracked?
Daniel, are you there or not? There he is.
I don't know off the top of my head. It's something we don't necessarily track, but we review periodically. And essentially, it's looking back at past permits issued. But the challenge I always find when doing it is we've had a number of people build on lots that allow a detached secondary suite. In essence, they build the smaller unit first. But in that case, we track it as the house. So it's built as a house, but they intentionally sort of sized it as a detached secondary suite, thinking that they will in future build the larger dwelling. And some of them have, and some don't, and just decide they actually prefer the smaller house. So in that case, it's always a little challenging looking back at our records to determine which was actually, how many were actually built.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Do we have a motion we have to pass?
Sorry?
Yeah, we passed the motion.
The recommendations council approved the 2022 Housing Advisory Committee work plan. I'll move that. Second. Somebody's got to second it. Maureen.
I'll second it.
Yeah, okay, we got it. Okay, all in favor, aye. Perfect. Thank you very much, you guys. Okay, so we're under new business. We got to be conscious of time here. Really conscious. CAO update, Liam.
Happy New Year, everyone. I'll leave it at that.
That's it. Eh? Okay, I love it. Update to council on Metro Vancouver business. Metro Vancouver Director David Hawking.
Another happy new year to everyone. Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. Update to council on Island Trust business. Island Trust Municipal Trustees Fast and Gale. Okay, who's going to start up? Oh yeah.
I presented last time. I can
Okay.
read out my little notes again,
No,
but I'll pass it over to Trustee Kale to talk about his newsletter.
yeah.
Thank you.
I do want just to go, and I'm only just going to hit the high points because as the mayor said quite rightly and very sagely, the time has gone on a bit. So very simply, the Southern Gulf Islands Residents and Business Coalition paper. And this was, when it was pointed out, I submitted it through Liam and pointed out quite rightly that it came across looking like an anonymous document. So what I did over the weekend, I actually contacted them through their email link. And wow, I have to tell you, it is anything but anonymous. And I have spent a lot of this last Saturday, Sunday, and Monday on Zoom calls. And what they did, what I said is, look, if you're making a point of view or you have something to say, you're going to have to sign it. We are not in the business, and I said it was my mistake, and it was, apologies, it's my mistake. I cannot submit something which doesn't have a signature or a name attached to it, and they corrected that. Very simply, and I'm going to skate through this, 3 major issues. As far as I was concerned, the notice was constructed very well, and it was punchy and concise. And it touched points that myself and other trustees are talking about very actively at the moment. And really, the three issues running in parallel at the moment. One is the budget. Now, the only 2 things I'm going to say about the budget is for several, I think I can confidently say 10 or 11 that I know of the trustees, by the way, of various points of view and minds. The growth of the budget in and of itself is a matter of concern, and I'm going to leave it there because we're still at the draft budget stage. However, it is a concern. And it's a concern now, and it's out there, and people have done their graphs and they've shown the plans, and there's a graph attached to this, and it speaks for itself. On financial issues as well, if this budget is to be passed over the 4-year term of this council, our requisition will come to about $1,280,000 over 4 years. And I doubt whether that's going to totally pass by unnoticed. So there's 2 financial issues. As I say, I'm going to try and keep this to its limit. The governance and management review, we had, besides the fact that it is very much a topic of conversation, more so if I think maybe in the other islands, but we had our last meeting today of the steering committee. The governance and management review will be received on February the 14th. Sue Ellen, it was originally going to be February the 7th, I know, but that date has been, by agreement, has been with everybody there, has changed to the 14th. That governance review remains this sort of in-camera private property of the trustees until the trustees meeting in March. In March, the trustees hopefully in an open meeting, we'll be able to ask questions of the consultants. The report is the report. It won't be subject to alteration or any change, but any questions they have will be part of the trustees meeting in March. And we're really, fingers crossed, we really want that to be an open meeting, not a private meeting. And then it will then immediately be out in the public domain. It will then be immediately in the public domain. And just so you know that on the 14th of February, we all, myself as part of the steering committee, I have no prior privileged view of this report. We all get it, all the trustees and the CAO and everybody, they all get it on that day. So we're not in a position to have any previews. Nothing about the contents has been discussed with the steering committee. We are just merely here to move the process along. So that is that one. Thirdly, the public engagement phase. Now, public engagement is difficult. The Islands Trust have got consultants working on this. There is the issue with public engagement is how long, when is it deemed to be done? So this will be an ongoing discussion for the first quarter, because for a lot of people out there that I've spoken to, they're saying, well, you know, you're going to be doing this public engagement phase on the draft policy statement, but although we're commingling issues, running concurrently is a governance report. So really they are in some ways two separate issues, but if you're talking about an organization, it's going to be very, very difficult in reality to keep them totally separate. So those three issues, I think, are well explained in this document, which has been now been signed. It's a tribute. Four people have given their names and said, I have spoken to these people on Zoom. So you have my word. They are real bona fide island residents. They do exist. They are really decent people. They are just wishing the best for their communities in the same way as we wish the best for our communities. So a lot more to follow, but there is a tremendous amount. There are a tremendous amount of wheels moving. There's a lot of activity happening. The earth is somewhat shaking under the ground of Islands Trust, because with budgets, with the governance review, and the draft policy statement, that's a very heavy first quarter leading into the second quarter, which, by the way, of course, pretty much begins to emotionally wrap up the term of this group of trustees. So I'm rather looking forward. This is going to be quite an exciting time, and I look forward to reporting back. And I do have the authors' written agreement that to circulate this. And I will make a point of doing it, because I think it is even-handed and I think it explains things pretty well. So enough from me, and I will happily hand over to my colleague, Sue Ellen Fast. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mayor. I've just wanted to point people to the information items 12.2 A, B, C, and D. And I won't say much about them except to note that they're there. D is shoreline protection. They call it a model bylaw, 12.2D.
Yeah.
And but really it's more of a discussion paper, and it's something that all the islands can use and look at. And it was it's there as one of the outcomes of Council's Trust Council strategic plan. And I'll also point to B, that's the Islands Trust Conservancy report. And just note that in that Conservancy report, I'm on that board, there were two natural area tax exemption program covenants registered and accepted. So that means people get a tax break if they put a nature protection covenant on part of their property or their whole property. This is for people who want to leave a green legacy. And so far, we haven't had any uptake on Bowen yet. So I just wanted to mention that to let people know that that is something that's available in the Islands Trust area and it's not available anywhere else yet. So other parts of the province are envious, and maybe there's somebody who would like to give me a call. Please do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sue Ellen. Maureen, do you have a question?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if the shoreline protection model bylaw report should be forwarded to Parks, Trails and Greenways and to Environment and Climate Action.
No.
I was wondering whether council would like me to kind of talk to staff or make a list of all those different products that are coming from the term of Trust Council, because there's kelp mapping, there's all kinds of things that will be coming, or we can refer so that staff and we as council can look at it through the strategic planning process at that workshop, or should we refer to it right away? That's a good question, Maureen. And I was just going to ask for input, casual input. Maybe I'll get in touch with Liam and see what would be the best, and bring something to the next council meeting. How about that?
Sure.
Okay.
It's an interesting report and tackles an area of concern.
Yeah.
Myself.
And it's always so awkward to have these verbal updates and not be able to quite know what to do with it. But we've got some strategic planning we need to be thinking about. And so I'll get in touch with Liam and we'll bring something. I'll bring something. Well, thank you.
And so we're going to go with the update to council on Metro Vancouver Regional Parks Committee meetings. Councillor Nicholson.
Happy New Year.
Awesome. Update to council on TransLink's Mayor's Committee council meetings. Councillor
Happy New Year.
Whoa, fabulous. Move to a closed council meeting. The council moved to a closed council meeting immediately following the regular council meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 90-1A and C of the community charter.
I'll move.
I'll move that. And second, sorry. Thank you. I got Rob there. And all in favor, aye. Good. We'll go there then. And we're going to move down here and question period.
I have a question. Do we stay in this meeting?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we have a 5-minute break?
Yes,
please.
Let's say,
Thank you again, Ellen. Yeah.
yeah, perfect. How about 9:00? Let's make it real quick though, 9:03 or something like that. That works for you? About 6 minutes.
Staying on this one, Gary, or there's a Zoom?
Staying on this one, yeah, David.
On this
Stay here. Yep. Thanks.
Thanks.